Let's talk more about this as well as Absa's economic outlook on South Africa with Absa economist Miyelani Maluleke. Miyelani, many thanks for your time this evening. Before we get into the roundtable discussion that you had this afternoon on South Africa's economic outlook, I just want to reflect on what was presented by National Treasury today and highlight that I suppose it's a good thing that National Treasury had that extra revenue to allocate to these trying times instead of perhaps going to borrow or get into further debt.
Yeah, that's right. So I think we've been a little bit fortunate in the sense that, since the second half of last year and quite a bit into this year as well, we have seen specifically our export commodity prices performing really strongly. And we've seen, I think, the mining sector benefiting on the back of that. And I think some of this revenue outperformance that the National Treasury is talking about certainly coming from the performance that we're seeing in the mining sector, and more specifically these very high commodity prices. And I think if you think of all possible uses of limited resources right now, I think it would be very difficult to disagree with the government or the National Treasury that the little bit of fiscal space that seems to have opened up is probably best used right now to support businesses that are struggling as a result of the ongoing pandemic, but also recent events, but as well as a lot of households out there who've lost jobs or who've certainly been struggling to find employment in the current difficult economic environment.
Yeah, but National Treasury was at pains to stress in their briefing this afternoon that they can only do this using that excess revenue if it's for a short period of time. It's not something sustainable given what we've been seeing in terms of tax revenue collection apart from the mining sector. But let's continue on with what impact the rioting had on GDP overall. We had S&P coming through on Monday indicating that 0.7 percentage points are going to be shaved off economic growth this year. Absa's reflection on the unrest and what it means for GDP in 2021.
Yeah, so before we get to the GDP, I would just like to say that I think that the fact that National Treasury is coming out to say that they can only do this as a temporary measure is still a reflection of just where we are fiscally. We still do have very difficult fiscal position here in South Africa, where we're still going to be seeing our debt rising over the next few years if we don't do anything to contain expenditure or find a way to grow our economy a little bit faster. And speaking of growing our economy a little bit faster, look, you're absolutely right that the recent events that we've seen here in South Africa, not just this recent incidents of rioting and looting, but the third wave as well as the associated lockdown restrictions that came with that are certainly going to have an impact on the pace of recovery that we've seen. And I think on the issue of the rioting and looting specifically, at this stage, I think it's still too early to know with certainty just what the full economic damage is going to be, because it's not just what we're going to see in the short term, but we're probably also going to see business confidence over the longer run respond in an adverse way as well. Our view is that in the third quarter of this year, the combination of this recent riots and looting, as well as the third wave and associated lockdowns, are likely to actually deliver a GDP contraction of 2.0% quarter-on-quarter on an annualized basis. But assuming that we don't see additional negative shocks, we do think that we could see some recovery into the fourth quarter.
So much to discuss, so little time, Miyelani. We'll have to catch up at another time. That is Miyelani Maluleke, who's the Absa economist, giving us a roundup of the country's economic outlook for 2021.